Max, the one to watch for the best in entertainment, now has live sports with the Bleacher Report sports add-on.
5, 4, 3, 2, I let one go.
Stream hundreds of select live games from MLB.
That's gonna go!
NBA, NHL, U.S. Soccer, and NCAA Men's March Madness.
We just see what we think we just saw!
And it's all included for a limited time with any Max subscription.
He got him!
After the promo period, add it for $9.99 a month. Base subscription required.
Apple Card is the credit card created by Apple. You earn 3% daily cash back up front when you use it to buy a new iPhone 15, AirPods, or any products at Apple. And you can automatically grow your daily cash at 4.15% annual percentage yield when you open a high-yield savings account. Apply for Apple Card in the Wallet app on iPhone. Apple Card subject to credit approval. Savings is available to Apple Card owners subject to eligibility. Savings accounts by Goldman Sachs Bank USA, member FDIC. Terms apply.
This episode is brought to you by Columbia Sportswear. It's snowing again, and that wind chill is killer. But you're not worried about that because you shop the Omni Heat Infinity Collection. It's warmth perfected with tiny gold dots that reflect your body heat inside and protect you from the cold outside. No snow or chilly temps can stop you now. Go out anyway. Shop the Omni Heat Infinity Collection now at Columbia.com/infinity.
Serie A Chronicles is a Media Chronicles production.
Hey everybody, it's Nikki here from Serie A Chronicles. Before we get started with this week's episode, just wanted to let you guys all know that you can head over to serieachronicles.com/Patreon now to get a free 7-day trial of our Chronicles Tifosi membership that will give you priority access to every episode and voice note before the rest of the world, plus no ads and bonus Patreon-only exclusive episodes. And you can join the new chat community over there as well in the Patreon app and chat with fellow subscribers. Mina has rushed back to do this episode with me so that we could talk about Italy and England together. We were, as you know, doing our recordings a bit separately to start the season, but we're trying out our video postcards. There's still going to be video postcards this season, but it's always more fun to talk about things with a friend, and I'm excited to get to talk to about this game with Mina. I have such mixed up feelings about this game. Sorry, to introduce that properly, England 3, Italy 1, Euro 2024 qualifier was played just last night. Obviously, that qualified England to the Euros. England have qualified. Italy have 2 games left still in the group, and they need to take 4 points from those 2 games is essentially what it boils down to. But let's just talk about England and Italy first, Mina. What did you make of that performance? Because this was really sort of sold, I think, as the first big test of Luciano Spalletti's time in charge.
Listen, I think there's a lot of criticism for Spalletti and some of his decisions and the players that he chose to go with and the style that he chose to go with. It was more of a, let's see what our ideology brings and what kind of results, and let's try to analyze where we're really at the moment. And then we know the scope of work and what we have to do going forward, how we can improve, what our limitations are. To be honest with you, it's not too dissimilar to what Pioli did in the derby at the time, I thought as well. I mean, some weird decisions, but it was almost like, I'm going to play this game how I want to play this game and see what our problems are so I can make it better. The thing is that Pioli has a lot of time to work with Milan and make it better. My fear with Spalletti as coach of the national team is that he doesn't have enough time to try to get this team to truly show off the style of play that they want to show off, and especially when we're now at like pressure spot, have to qualify, fighting all the psychological demons of not having qualified before and being against teams like North Macedonia. So this puts me in a weird position about how I feel as Spalletti as coach. But overall, I think that it wasn't as bad as everyone likes to think. Like, everyone is like, oh, England is going to be the favourites going forward. And maybe they should, because anyone who possesses Bellingham right now has to be considered a favourite. But I also don't feel like it was such a bad performance from Italy, considering all the problems coming into this game. The absences, obviously, the betting scandal, which we will talk about later. So all in all, I don't think it was that disastrous. But having said all of that, I'm not that optimistic about Italy, should they even qualify, about how far they'll get.
It's just so many layers to it, aren't there? I was saying to people before this game, I did an interview with the World Service and I said this, and I feel like I didn't hear many other people saying this, so I want to reiterate it. Weirdly, for Italy, this game wasn't that consequential, because if Italy won this game and say they go on and win the next game against North Macedonia as well, they would still go for that final game against Ukraine in Leverkusen, knowing that a defeat could knock them out. So actually, in some ways, this didn't necessarily change that much for Italy. Now, it does increase the pressure to go and win the game against North Macedonia, because if you don't win that now, then this matters more. But really, that the group, because of how it was set up, because of other results, because the points already dropped against North Macedonia, this sort of was a free hit. It was really a game where I think he could afford to play it his way and accept if it didn't go Italy's way. Obviously, also because England are a good team and you're going to Wembley and you are going to have expectations that fit accordingly. And same as you, I came away feeling like in the first half, there was some really positive stuff. Obviously, Italy took the lead. They also had chances to increase that lead. They had chances to make it 2-0 and chances at 1-1 to score a second goal. So it was not a performance in which there was nothing to hold on to and nothing to redeem at all. But I also think in the second half, there was a real gap between the two teams. I think that England did pull away. And part of it is very simple to explain, which is that England have Jude Bellingham, because Jude Bellingham is a brilliant footballer and is a transformative impact on a game, which Italy simply don't have a player like that at the moment. And to be fair, not many countries in the world have a Jude Bellingham. You think it was his run that wins the penalty. It was his run, not just the assist for Rashford, but actually his run across the defender that makes space for Rashford. And as I was saying on Football Weekly, actually recorded this morning, he brings a swagger. It was almost like Rashford fed off his confidence. Like Bellingham's doing this and suddenly I believe in myself as well. And that's something that you can't have if you don't have it. You either have that player or you don't. But I do think there are things that are more concrete that we can say about this Italy performance that weren't perfect. You clearly mean it when you talk about the approach of Spalletti. Well, I shouldn't say clearly. You tell me. I'm hearing that, and I assume what you mean is too aggressive in the press, too much willing to commit bodies forward, and not attentive enough in the defending. Is that what you meant by that?
Yes, he is, as coach of Napoli, said that we want to play on front foot. He keeps talking about modern football, free football. And he has always said in the past that involves taking risks at the back. It's one thing when you're taking risks at the back and you have players who are capable of the one-on-one or defensive stalwarts in the way that there was with Giorgio Chiellini and Leonardo Bonucci. It's somewhat different when it's Acerbi, Bastoni, Scalvini, not because they're not very good players. They're very good players. They're just not ideal for what it is that we're looking to do. This team isn't well-versed defensively enough. And the desire to play it forward requires a lot of rehearsing, and it requires a lot of time to really process how the team can play on the ball and off the ball and the movements concerned. And it's just not something that can be done when we're in a pressured situation right now. And there comes a time where you need to be pragmatic. And I'm not entirely sure that Spalletti would ever choose the pragmatic option because it goes and contravenes his principles in general. It is always my belief, like I'm always going to be on the side of a pragmatist in general, but people like Spalletti has made me change my mind when it comes to sort of club coaching. You know, he is somebody who raises the level of the IQ of his players, and I think he's an exceptional coach. He's always been an exceptional coach, but I still have I still have sort of problems accepting these types of coaches, but I think he's proved to us time and time again he has what it takes, even though it's taken him a long time to win the Scudetto. But you know, that's neither here or there. But my issues with him is the defensive risks that he will take. This team is not good enough because the midfield doesn't have enough to stop. It doesn't have filter, and the back line is not good enough in the 1-to-1. And so I have a problem with us taking any risks defensively. I think that we do need a more pragmatic approach, because pragmatic approaches cover up the weaknesses within the squad. If this is a team that we had, you know, I don't know, Pirlo and Marquisio. Our Euro 2012 team, to be honest with you, was filled with a lot of technical talent. Had that been the team, then I'm all for playing the Spalletti way. But at a time when we have a lot of limitations and a possibility of losing out even more stars going forward, considering there could be a scandal that would have a lot of players missing, then I think that we need a different approach. And what worries me with Spalletti is that he wants this high aggression, which doesn't work when you're trying to recover and you are in the middle of a tournament. And I'm scared. I'm really honestly scared, because I would prefer somebody who is more of a taskmaster, if you like, somebody who is going to get them in physical shape, who's going to whip, who's going to scream at them, and then he can go after the Euros. But it's just about a quick turnover. And then maybe Spalletti can come in and give us a whole ideology if he likes. But I don't think there's enough time right now for us to sort of get into shape, even though I think he's a brilliant coach. So this is not me doubting him in any way, but it's just doubting the team right now going forward.
Listeners, before we start this podcast, she might kill me for saying this now, Mina threw out a name as someone who she thought maybe would be the better choice right now than Spalletti. And it's not a name that you might expect Mina to be in support of. Mina, who is it that you think should be in charge of the national team right now, if not Spalletti?
Antonio Conte.
Can you believe it? I mean, but for new listeners, that might not be as controversial. People might hear that and go, well, yeah, Antonio Conte's a good coach. He did a good job at Euros before. For regular listeners of the podcast, the idea that Mina would be calling for anyone to hire Antonio Conte might come as a bit more of a surprise.
Yeah, he is a stab myself in the eye kind of coach for me, but I'm not asking him to take on Juventus. I would honestly, at this moment, rather anyone, including, I don't know, my grandmother, to take that job. But for the national team, I think he's somebody who could create a quick mentality, a fight mentality, if you want, somebody who can psychologically spur them on and do the pragmatic choice. I don't think it's going to be fun to watch. But here's the thing, like, you watch England, right? And you think like it's fantastic, but I think that we did a good job in sort of shutting down Rashford and Foden. I've mixed those names together. It is obviously when you have players like Jude Bellingham who can move centrally like that. And what annoys me, right, is that on the sideline, the report from the pitchside reporter for Rai was saying that when the goal was scored, and Rashford did what Rashford did. What Bellingham did to get the ball. And he said, well, there's very little you can do to stop that. And I was like, no, you see, we can stop that. And the fact is that you like that annoys me. Do you know what I mean? Like, as in, that really annoys me, because I'm telling you right now that if this was Juventus playing from under, even Allegri or Conte, that counterattack would have been stopped. And so, yes, Bellingham truly is a supreme, confident and dazzling player to watch, and any side that has Bellingham should be feared. But I just feel like there could have been more done to stop him. And maybe we wouldn't have been able to. But I worry going forward. And I do think without Bellingham, maybe England wouldn't have been so spectacular to watch, because I do think that we would have been able to shut down the other threats. But I also get angry when you turn around and watch this and say, wow, I mean, that's just brilliant. Like, how are we supposed to stop that? What do you mean?
You want to see a bit more old-fashioned cynicism from the Italian team.
Yes.
I hear you on that. I think in terms of that, it's worth saying I do think Udogi's early yellow card perhaps stopped him from playing as on a fine line as he might have done, because he's not someone who's shy of making those sorts of challenges. I think it was a really interesting, just to get back to the team selection, it was a really interesting team selection. I was quite surprised by a lot of the team selection, and yes. If I'm being honest, there were several pieces in there that were not what I was expecting. I think it was 8 changes from the game against Malta. And some of that, of course, makes sense because, quick turnaround, but still it felt like there was a lot of gambles in this. Stefan El-Shaarawy, certainly with the best one in the world, I feel like his moment is Italy's... his moment as an Italy prospect has been and gone, and seeing him in the lineup was a surprise. I also think, and this is actually where we get to conversations about pragmatists and idealists and all the rest of it. I also think he's got a real dilemma going forward about the left-hand side of that defence, because I am all on board with Udogie. He's a brilliant footballer, and I think it's a great thing to give him his chances. And perhaps even you looked at this game and thought, well, he's been playing in the Premier League, so he's more familiar with some of these players. But to me, Federico Di Marco is one of the first names on the team sheet. I think Di Marco has been exceptional for Inter now for at least a year, and he's played in the Champions League final in the spring. And I think that core of an Inter defense that you could keep together with Bastoni, with Acerbi, with Di Marco is something really meaningful that you carry over from club level, that you get to use at international level. That's an asset. I think when we talk about the high press, the more aggressive way of playing, I see what he's thinking with this lineup. First of all, because he plays a back four and not a back three. So Di Marco plays at wing back for Inter. Do you think he's going to do the same job for you at left back? I see that. You've gone with Scalvini, who plays for Gasperini at Atalanta. So, of course, is used to aggressive high lines, is used to being put in one-on-one positions, is used to having to use his pace. That's someone who you think, okay, he's 19 years old, but we know he can do this sort of football. I understand the decisions. Di Lorenzo at right back, you're looking at someone who has played in Spalletti's system, so completely obvious you're going to ask him to play as well. But I do want, going forward, I want Spalletti to look at these players and say, okay, well, I've got Udogie and I've got Di Marco. How can I put them in the same team? Because they're both great. So I want to see how you can get them in the same team. Whether or not you do that against England, I don't know. And whether or not it was the right choice to go with the less experience of the two in the game against England, I think you can ask a question about. But this 4-3-3 of his, I don't want that to be an excuse to leave out one of the best players in Italy. I really don't, because we don't have such
How would you do it, though?
That you should be saying goodbye to him. Well, there's lots of ways you could do it. You could say, can one of these players play in a more advanced wide position? Could one of them play on the left of midfield? Could one of them play on the left of, even of attack, given Di Marco's crossing? And then you've just got an attacker who is going to contribute more defensively. And if you're going to play a high press, maybe he could. Or you change your formation and you don't stick to a rigid formation that worked for you at club level. You say, okay, well, if we played with a 4-4-2, for instance, then you can really have two players on the left that overlap each other and work well together. I think not being rigid, I would be a fan of. And maybe that's just me and my personal banner for Di Marco, but I think he's too good not to be a part of this team. And I think that if this was a do or die game against England, then I would not prefer to see Scalvini starting it. And that's not with a lack of enjoyment for Scalvini. I think Scalvini is going to be brilliant for the national team for a long time. But right now, if you want your strongest 11, I think it includes the Inter defense.
Okay, that makes sense to me. Sorry, I'm just trying to concentrate on how I would make it. So you would have played Bastoni at the back and Acerbi and Di Marco and kept sort of that.
I just think the understanding between those two centre-backs is something not to throw away. Non da buttare.
Okay, and what about, so basically you would have chucked Shaarawy out because you're like, what are we doing here with Shaarawy?
I mean, would you not rather, here's a question for you, Mina. I accept that we have a lack of attacking talents right now. Of course, Chiesa isn't there. And we really should get on to talking about Zaniolo and Tonali. But there is a shortage of attacking talent. Is it crazy of me to suggest that you could try Di Marco on the left of attack and see what happens? We know you can cross. We know you want to play a high press. Why not?
No, it's not crazy. It's just that, I mean, where was Raspadori for this game? Was he not
on the bench when he came on? Yeah.
Like, why would you not start him is my point. Like, as in, we're seeing a quick turnaround. The guy's not 34 years old. Like, I understand Bonaventura not being there, but there's a difference when it's like, for example, Raspadori, or even the fact that you thought there were some really good things coming from, I mean, he mentioned himself, Spalletti, against Malta, that he liked what Keane was doing on the wing. I mean, he played better in the middle just because Raspadori was having a really tough time against the defenders, So why not put an actual attacker there? Like, I don't know if I would have a fullback is my point, but I do understand, and I understand from your point of view, which is have as much talent on the pitch as possible, and I agree with that. But I also have an issue with sort of the midfield in general, to be honest with you. I mean, that for me is the only thing that I just don't think there were enough bodies in there that I would like, bodies that are capable of the dualities of the role that we require to fight a physical team like England. and no real director. Do you know what I mean? I mean, I think this is the time that I would like to copy exactly what Napoli's doing, or Napoli did under Spalletti, and having that kind of like the technique of somebody like Lobotka, the strength of Anguissa, but also the tactical intelligence of Anguissa, you know, and just having sort of Barella, Fratesi and Cristante, I felt like there was something missing because we don't have those types of players. And so I almost feel like I would inject another player into that just to secure everything. But we didn't have that. So
would that player be Giacomo Bonaventura, who he ultimately described at one point? I mean, he was joking, but he said our Bellingham, and he also said he was our Iniesta.
Oh no. But like, why? I mean, I don't know, because he's a good player, but come on, do you know what I mean? Like,
okay, but I'm enjoying that because I think Spalletti was messing around. I don't think he was being too serious. But I think there is a serious question contained within that silly question, right? Which is, if this was not, as I said before, a game that Italy could in the end afford to lose, if this had been a do or die game, would you have preferred to see Bonaventura in there ahead of, say, Fratesi?
Yes.
Given, and
yes.
I've been big on Fratesi, and he's obviously done well for the national team, but Bonaventura is playing really well. He's having a really good season so far.
Yes, and we need players on the ball. But I also would like to see Pessina in the squad, you know, like... I do want to see I want Rovella to get a chance, because I think he's been pretty good for Lazio, and he was excellent last season. I do want more of the kids showing up, rather than us being like, okay, Bonaventura is going to play twice in this week, and going forward we have a Euros in which, like, I don't know, is he going to be 35 by then? And it's cool. Like, I want him to include it. It's not that, but let's also give the other kids a chance, because we know that we can't call on Fagioli, and, you know, and Tonali is missing, and, you know, we have problems right now in calling players in midfield. You know, Locatelli and Pessina had a really great connection in the Euros, and that was very evident. And I don't know why we've never looked back at that connection again, you know? So it's sort of different things, because we've seen Cristante having problems at Roma without having somebody like a Matic right beside him, you know? And I just feel like, yes, I probably would have played Bonaventura in this match. I would have played a lot of different players in this match. I'm not going to lie. And this is where I go back to Spalletti still, and has the right to continue to experiment, to try to find what the limitations of his squad is and what the strengths are, so that he can build for the future. And I think this gave him a lot of answers. But I feel like he's too ponderous when he requires things. He takes a long time to experiment. Spalletti, we've seen him take a long time to experiment. And, you know, the first year that he, you know, Napoli last, like the season before they won the Scudetto, a lot of the time I was like, what are you doing? So, and they were mentally fragile. So I'm scared about the fragility of the squad as well, because they started very well, but sort of just didn't decide to like give up halfway through. And this side doesn't have any veteran, like, sort of the power that they had in the Euros. You know, when you have like a Chiellini who's like the bag, you know, with bandages across all his face, you know, I don't see that veteran quality. So mostly I don't really care about the talent. Who is the guy that's going to push this team forward? And I do think it's someone like Udogie and Di Marco. In fact, I think there might be two of the leaders there, you know. So and I worry about the lack of leadership all over the squad.
Yeah, I definitely think there's an absence left by the departures of Chiellini and Buffon before that, and that hasn't necessarily been filled. We don't have those veteran leaders yet, and some of the players who are growing into those leadership roles, like Barella, who I thought did some good things in this game, but he should be taking on a leadership role. He's not necessarily a player that I would want in that role, because he's so hypercritical of his teammates all the time. He's not someone who is always easy to lean on in those moments. And that is a void. And perhaps is another argument for having Bonaventura on the pitch, because actually I do think he's quite a natural sort of, not screaming, shouting leader, but he is someone who has that maturity about him that I think a lot of people find quite, I don't know, a calming presence sometimes to have alongside them. I think we should get on to addressing the players who weren't there and who presumably will not be there for the rest of this qualifying campaign. So just to reiterate the position, Italy are currently third in the group. However, they've got a game in hand on Ukraine. That game in hand is at home to North Macedonia. And it really is pretty simple. They've got home to North Macedonia and away to Ukraine. Of course, Ukraine, the away game is in Leverkusen, not in Ukraine, for obvious reasons. But it really is 4 points from those two games. Because if you beat...
Actually, no, because of the head-to-head record, they only actually need to win against Ukraine if they lose against North Macedonia.
Well, if they draw against North Macedonia, then they would still be on 11 points to Ukraine's 13, so they need to win the game then. So
yeah, so just to win. But even if they lose, they would still win, right?
So you're right, actually, in that case, they could lose North Macedonia and still win against Ukraine. You're right. So it could be 3 points in that one situation. But otherwise, so yes, if you win against North Macedonia, then it's a draw or win in the final game. If they were to lose North Macedonia, then it's a win-only outcome. Sorry, if they fail to beat North Macedonia, then it's a win-only outcome in the final game against Ukraine. That wasn't very well explained in the end, was it? Mina corrected me with justification. So let me say it one more time so it's a bit more clear. Italy need to either beat North Macedonia and then they will have a draw or win possibility in the final game, or they need to, if they fail to beat North Macedonia, they will need to beat Ukraine in the final game. That's what it comes down to. The situation has been complicated by a significant betting scandal that is still ongoing, still unfolding in Italy. This story had already sort of begun with news that Nicolò Fagioli is under investigation. Of course, Serie A's young player of the season last season, someone who was getting some important minutes at Juventus. And at the end of last week, as Italy were preparing for the game against Malta, there was a police raid at Italy's Coverciano training base where Turin police showed up and asked some questions of Niccolò Zaniolo and Sandro Tonali. Those two players subsequently left Italy's training camp the next morning. To be clear, neither of them is currently suspended from playing football. They could have played for Italy. They can go back to the clubs and continue playing for the time being. But it was decided by Italy that they were not in the right headspace to do it. What we know is that they are under investigation by police as part of a wider investigation into illegal betting in Italy. Now, that investigation is not football specific. That is a broader police investigation that goes to websites that are unlicensed on which people are placing bets. And that is a criminal investigation. If they are found to have been gambling on illegal websites, they could face fines, potentially a prison sentence of up to 3 months. But this is a sliding scale. And by far the most likely outcome in that case would be fines. The more serious implications for them come on the footballing side, because in the sporting, in Italy's sporting code, it is explicitly forbidden for footballers to gamble on football. They're not allowed to gamble on any football conversation that falls on any football match that falls under the jurisdiction of FIFA, UEFA, or the Italian Football Federation. Now, Nicolò Fagioli, who I mentioned before, has reached a plea bargain in his case. He was already under investigation before this raid at the Coverciano, has been in dialogue with the Italian sporting prosecutor for the last few weeks, and has now reached a plea bargain in which he's going to accept a 7-month suspension from football, with a further 5 months suspended, in which time he's going to be expected to conduct certain activities designed to, rehabilitate himself and also spread an important message to younger footballers. He's going to speak to young people about the risks of gambling, because Fagioli has basically confessed that he was addicted to gambling, and that's the point he got to. He built up significant debts. He's said that when he made a mistake and then was seen crying on the bench against Sassuolo last season for Juventus, that was actually because he was so stressed out and upset about millions of euros in outstanding debts that he had. So he's very much confronting his problems, is going to therapy, and has reached this plea bargain for a 7-month suspension. We do not know yet what the outcome will be for Tonali and Zaniolo, but we do know they've taken very different responses to what's happened with this investigation. Tonali has effectively gone to the sporting prosecutor, Kine, and has said, I would also like to acknowledge everything I've done wrong. I have bet on football, and I want to acknowledge that I also have been addicted to gambling, and is effectively taking the same approach that Fagioli did. The comments so far are that Meanwhile, Zaniolo has said, I did not bet on football. I only might have done some betting on poker or blackjack on websites that weren't licensed. So all of this is to be verified. The Turin prosecutor seized phones and electronic devices from both of them during the raid at Coverciano. So anything they say to Kine, the sporting prosecutor, is going to be cross-referenced with what the Turin prosecutor finds. But assuming Tonali is being truthful and that he is being fully upfront with the prosecutor, then your first expectation was, well, perhaps this will be a similar outcome to what happened with Fagioli. There is a potential complicating factor, which is, did Tonali bet on his own games? And that could lead to a more severe sentence. Again, anything else we can say about that at this point is speculation. There has been some speculation in the newspapers. I don't really want to go into it because I think that's not legally good ground for us to be on. But that would be a factor that could potentially lead to a lengthening of his ban beyond the 7 months Fagioli got. There could be other circumstances that the prosecutors will consider that are different to Fagioli that may also lead to a different ban. But the indication we have is 7 months is probably the lowest bar you can expect for Tonali suspension. So almost certainly Tonali is going to be suspended for this entire football season at a minimum. And that ban will extend to the Premier League, or at least that is what the Italian Football Federation will expect, is that it gets extended across any league that falls under UEFA's auspices, much the same as when Paratici was banned. His ban also applied to Premier League activities. So this is a very serious situation for Tonali and for Newcastle. Again, Zaniolo denies any claims that he bet on football. So remains to be seen what comes out of his investigation, but potentially if he is vindicated in those claims, there's no reason he should serve a footballing suspension. He likely will face a fine. And there is, again, within the law, there is a provision for a prison sentence, but that is not the expected outcome. So those are what those two players are facing, and anything else is a wait and see at this point. Mina, if I covered everything.
Nikki, I think you should be a lawyer. Like, you just laid the facts out so perfectly here, you know? like it was like, so this is what it is. This is what I'm allowed to say.
Yeah.
I was like, if it was me, I would have started drawing circles all around the place, you know, being like, oh, and also this, oh, and also that, you know. It was like, you just delivered it in one speech. It's amazing.
Yeah. Amazing. I have done it once already for The Guardian today, so that helps. And I wrote about it for The Guardian this week. It is a moving story as well, worth saying that. By the time you hear this podcast, things may have moved on. We may have more things said. There is more that I could say in terms of so-and-so has reported this, so-and-so has reported that. But I think it's better in this situation to not open ourselves up with that sort of speculation. I think leave that to the people who have their sources, and I'll stick to what I know from my sources.
I think it's interesting also the differences between sort of Ivan Toney and the Fagioli case, you know, like how the Premier League has handled betting, and sort of the criticism that's being aimed right now at Serie A for how significant possibly the punishments could be. When you consider that Fagioli self-reported, admitted his mistakes, has sought therapy, and has talked openly about collaborating. Well, his legal representative, his agent has talked about how he's cooperated with everyone, and he still had 7 months. When you consider how many over 200 breaches of irregularities in betting by Tony has landed him with 8 months. So is Serie A is the Italian FA too harsh with their penalties and punishments? I honestly don't know. But it's amazing how we draw so many. I don't know. We look at somebody like sort of Fagioli crying on the sidelines in that substitution against Sassuolo, and you say, well, this is probably what it is, right? Like, it is because he made a mistake. It is because of this. And we just make so many assumptions going forward in football about anything, about why players will walk off, about why they get upset in a specific match, about why they didn't shake the coach's hand or whatever it is. And then you realize most of the time it's probably just a lie, because we don't know what's going on in their lives or what they're thinking about or going about. And it is a disease, obviously, when you think of how many players, you know, we're talking about right now, and kids that had a really bright future ahead of them that now have to miss out on certain months. And it's very sad to see, but I don't know, because I really thought Fagioli could be a real big presence as well for the national team, not just Juventus, who have already had to deal with the whole, doping scandal of Paul Pogba, poor guy. And then, of course, now that they're missing Fagioli. And so basically, any day now, I'm going to be going and playing in midfield for them because they're just running out of options. So.
I mean, in a sporting sense, it's obviously, it's I was going to say tragic, and maybe that's too strong a word in a time when there's some real tragedy happening everywhere in the world, it feels like. But it's a crushing shame for 3 footballers, potentially, well, certainly 2, and we'll see on Zaniolo, but it looks like at least 2 footballers are going to be missing, most likely a full season of their careers at a time when they could be growing, when they could be reaching new heights. Tonali, of course, making the step to the Premier League, taking that gamble and having an encouraging, if not perfect start, but an encouraging start. Fagioli making this breakthrough at Juventus. These are, all 3 of them, absolutely players who are part of Luciano Spalletti's Italy plans. They are really significant footballers. And in Fagioli's case, the way it's been reported so far, the things that he's said publicly so far, or at least his representatives said publicly, it really feels like a case of something just so casually fallen into. It feels like a case of something where he was away at his international under 21 training camp and was a bit bored and started gambling, and then it just spiraled and got out of hand for him. And I do think it's so easy to look at footballers and think, oh, well, they've got everything. They're so gilded and protected. When you talk about a €3 million debt, which is, again, is what's been said for Fagioli. This is a player who, yes, is doing brilliantly for any young footballer in his career. He's playing for Juventus, and he still only makes €1 million a season, right? So that's a huge amount of money by anyone else's reckoning. But put that in the context of a €3 million debt, you can run up debts from any starting point. So I think that you have to hope that all of the things that are being said right now by the people in power about not abandoning these young players, about making sure that they're looked after, and that, yes, you punish them, but also you try to look after them. You have to hope that's more than just lip service. On the gambling thing, Italian football actually has had this sort of ban on gambling companies on sponsors on shirts, which the Premier League doesn't, which other leagues don't. That there's a lot of hypocrisy in football around the advertising of gambling that goes on when there's stories like this happening. So it's a crying shame, and all you can hope is that these players make the right decisions from here on out and come back and come out better for it on the other side.
But I do think that this isn't the first betting scandal that has happened in Italy. And I do wonder how, looking at these things, what can be done to support these kids? We talk about sort of bringing in the new generation. We talk about less talent being available to national team coaches. What is being done to support a lot of these kids growing up, and making sure that they don't fall or suffer these types of tragedies going forward? Because I think there's a lot of questions right now with how we're doing and how much we're asking of our children. And one thing that Italy has always been sort of known about is that it's tough growing up. So tough growing up in Italy in the sense that, when you make it as a footballer, you've already been criticized and taunted so many times that you can survive the pressure of the big games, right? Which is what makes it different, which is why Italy can win 4 World Cups. But also comes a point where they are still human beings, and are they being supported enough to avoid certain tragedies? So I think that that's something we need to talk about right now going forward. And I think that I agree with you. They need to pay lip service. I think that there needs to be more done to support Italian football players, Italian football clubs with these types of things, because right now everyone's just out there to make money, and a lot of these guys are not feeling or being respected as human beings first and foremost.
Absolutely. Really tough story to have to cover, sad story, and we'll try and come back to it when we have more information, maybe even next week. But I think we've probably said everything there is to say for now on that, and on Italy, England.
Wait, quickly.
Yes, yeah.
Will they qualify?
I still think so. Yes. I'm going to be so nervous ahead of these last two games. Of course, North Macedonia are at risk of becoming this giant overarching nightmare in the Italian psyche now, having failed to beat them twice. But I think there was a lot encouraging in these performances, and indeed in the last two performances under Spalletti. I think there is, when people talk about the fall in talent in Italy, of course there's truth in it. There is a real shortage at certain positions and in attack in particular. But you can't look through this squad and tell yourself this team shouldn't be qualifying. You can't look at the squad that still has Barella, that still has Locatelli, that still has an entire defense that you could take from.
Nikki, you're struggling to name the talent.
No, I'm not. Di Marco, Bastoni, Acerbi, and Damian. Like, that's an entire back line you could pick from the Champions League winner, from the Champions League finalists.
Yes.
It's not a question of the names. There is talent. There is a talent. It's just about putting it together. And I mean, come on, North Macedonia can't name a side anything like as strong as that. They can't. Whether or not they get the result is a different question, but they can't. And Ukraine is a bit of a different story, of course, that they are, again, just going through what their players do at club level. They have more talent in that side, but Italy should go there needing only a draw, and they've already beaten them in Spalletti's second game in charge. They're more than capable of it. Whether or not they'll do it is another question, but they should. How are you feeling? Yes or no?
I don't know. It's the mentality, right? You can have as many good players as you like, but the Italy of old could be destroyed by some of the best teams in the world, like in 1982, really struggle in the group stages, but their mentality is what always carried them through, and I just don't see that right now. So I have question marks, but even when it comes to naming talent, I agree with you. Obviously, on paper, the side is better than most, and it should be going through with relative ease. But I'm somebody who believes a lot in the other side of the game, which is the psychological, side of it, which is how much do you believe in yourself? And if I'm looking to wondering why Bonaventura is not playing this game for me to like think going forward if the side's strong enough, I have my qualms. I have my qualms about how many injuries they may suffer and go without. I just feel like it's a bit of a cursed team at the moment. I just think there's a problem every day. I'm not sure how they can continue overcoming them. And ideally, this is the time when I say to you, I need our big forces in Serie A to do well. And I'm glad that Inter at least have a backline that we can pluck right now and rely on. I wish Milan had more stars, and I wish Juventus wasn't falling down with all the scandals with them as well. So I hope so. But I like that there's a plan A, plan B, plan C. If we lose to North Macedonia, there's another hope. If we lose to Ukraine, there's another hope. So
there's still a playoff. That's it. Even if they fail, there's still a playoff. But my goodness, I can't do another playoff. I can't
do another playoff, Nikki.
It's too many playoffs. Let's have a quick look ahead to the weekend's games. This is a pretty meaty one on Sunday night. Milan against Juventus. There's also Torino against Inter, Sassuolo, Lazio, Roma, Monza, some of the big games this weekend. But Milan, Juve, how are you feeling about taking on the league leaders? Juventus have been in competitive form so far this season, but not always sparkling form.
Well, I mean, considering I'm probably going to have to don a kit and play in midfield, I'm not feeling that confident right now. Not that Fagioli was going to be the savior of the team, but Italy actually and Juventus always seem to do their best when everyone criticizes them sometimes, when they're really like drowning against the tide. So there is hope, but you know how I feel about Pioli. I feel like there's a lot more talent right now. They are missing the likes of Theo Hernandez, which is going to be tough for them going forward as well. So they do have important absences. I can't see this Milan team losing, just considering the amount of energy that they have, the tactical the movement, the tempo they play with. It's going to be perhaps a little bit too much for somebody like Gatti. No Danilo now with the absence as well, with the injury that he suffered while away in international duty. Is Chiesa there? Is Vlahovic there? Lots for Juventus to be a little bit worried about at the moment. So for me, I think this is a clear Milan win.
Also, sort of on the news front, obviously Victor Osimhen has picked up a thigh injury on international duty with Nigeria, is expected to miss 4 to 6 weeks, is what's being reported at the moment. Big blow for Rudy Garcia and for Napoli, I think, especially a worrying blow heading into some important Champions League games against Union Berlin. But they do have options. They do have Simeone, they do have Raspadori, so they're not short of alternatives up front. They go to Verona this weekend, first game of the weekend, actually, away on Saturday. Verona not starting the season well, but it's not, in general, a particularly friendly or comfortable stadium to go to, the Bentegodi, so not a cozy return for them either, missing their striker. As I said, Inter away to Torino, Sassuolo Lazio on Saturday night should be a cracking game, given how Sassuolo have approached their big games against the big teams so far this season. And also Fiorentina Empoli, there's a Tuscan derby on Monday, by Monday you'd hope that Bonaventura is suitably well rested to get back at full speed. He's 34, Mina. He's not 100. Acerbi's older than him and managed to get through a Champions League campaign last season, so I think he'll cope. Was there anything else you wanted to say on this week that's happened, or this week coming up, Mina?
To be honest with you, Nikki, I don't think that I have anything left to really to comment on. I feel a little bit drained just by everything that's going on in this world, and of course in football in general. It would be really nice if we can go through just a chill 6 months, where we're not having to look down off the barrel of another scandal going on, which just makes me very depressed. And it makes me depressed as well going forward about how many hashtags of Allegri out going to be rolling around by Sunday after another loss to Milan, I'm sure. But no, I certainly don't have anything to say. Do you want to do a few shout outs for new Chronicles Tifosi members?
We should. We haven't done shout outs for a while. Let's do some shout outs. I'll take the first half list, Mina, and then you can pick up the second half. So we've got some new Chronicles Tifosi you wanted to welcome into the fold. So hello and thank you for supporting us to Thomas Chard, Kunal Soni, Per Hovem, and Rory O'Donoghue.
And hello and welcome to Nancy Quintanilla. I hope I said that right. Chris Norton, Jerry Halverson, and Kevin Boylan. Thank you for signing up and welcome to the Serie A Chronicles. I think that's all we have time for. We'll hopefully be back next week to report on everything that's happened in Serie A and obviously how any scandals might have progressed by then. So thank you for joining us. Thank you to all our Patreons for the recent feedback as well. Find us on Twitter at Nikki Bandini, at Mina Rizuki, and subscribe to Serie A Chronicles on YouTube for clips and short videos of the show. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for listening. Good night. Hello, hello, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Hello, hello. How does that sound?
Sports Social Podcast Network.
Joe Burrow, professional quarterback.
How did a small-town kid get here? It was never about starting off perfect. It was just about starting. Replacing self-doubt with self-care and learning how food can heal. It's all about having the right support from people who understand what you need. Because I'm not your average Joe, and neither are you.
Get the personalized care you deserve. Baker's, a world of care is in store.